What is up, everybody? It's Lewpac here, back with another Albion Online video for you, and today we're going to be talking about fame farming. I'm going to be putting together a series of videos over the coming weeks and months about the different options for fame farming in the game, telling you what they are, the best ways to do them, and of course, the all-important, how much fame per hour can you get? Today, we're going to be looking at the Tier 5 Keeper Dungeons, also known as the Deepwood Enclave. You can find these all over the world of Albion. They're sort of a circle dungeon with a blue door on the map. Not to be confused with the Tower Dungeons, those are Morgana Dungeons, and they appear in Tier 5 zones. Now, these are actually one of my personal favorite dungeons. I've spent a lot of my in-game leveling time in these dungeons because of where my guild was based in our portion of Anglia. We actually had two of the Keeper Dungeons pretty much private for months on end, which was amazing. And what it did was actually allow us to perfect the dungeon clearing and the rotations. Now, dungeon clearing has come a long way with the development of the relic weapons. They've really helped those speed clears and stuff like that. And of course, I'm sure you guys want to know about the numbers, because I'm not going to make you wait till the end of the video before I tell you what the fame per hour can be like. But just to give you an idea, for these Keeper Dungeons, a good group using relics and stuff, the video you're going to see here, I mean, this wasn't an amazing group I was doing it with in the background of this video. We're going to show you all three rotations, but this group was probably hitting just shy of 400k an hour. And that's, as you'll see, that's with some mistakes and with some deaths and some silliness, because I was trying to record, so my focus wasn't 100%. We were doing some things wrong, but we still managed to almost break 500k. Now, one of the guys here, he absolutely specializes in these dungeon farms to the point that he sells spots in his groups to like the public if they want to come fame farm with him. Pre-patch, obviously the recent patch gave a 16.5% buff to the black zone. Pre-patch, he managed 650k or just below 650k an hour with the perfect 4-man group. I won't give away his exact lineup for that group because he actually asked me not to, because he wants to keep that one a secret. But I have seen evidence and it is possible. But a solid 400k, which is a very good rate of fame, you know, on par with what, level 9 plus hardcore expeditions, is very achievable in these dungeons. So let's talk a little bit about what you're going to need. First things first, you are going to need the entire dungeon to yourself. Unlike the tier 7 undead dungeons and some of the other stuff we're going to talk about in future videos, the Keeper Dungeon is focused on big AoE pools, smashing down huge groups of mobs and clearing very, very fast to attain good rates of fame. And to do this, because you're killing stuff so fast, you are going to need the entire dungeon to yourself. An optimal fame group, in my opinion, is 6 people, but generally anything between 5 and 8 is considered normal. Any more than 8 and you're drastically losing efficiency. We could talk a bit about the dungeon layout then. There's 3 sections to this dungeon, and I'm actually going to show you, slightly sped up of course to make it a bit more easy to watch, but we'll show you all 3 sections. In the north you have what's known as the giant section, in the east you have the warrior section, and in the south you have the mage section. Generally people's rotations go warrior, then giant, then mage. You A out after each rotation to the entrance, and then you go back in and you go to the next section. Now, you're going to want to run, for maximum efficiency, some expensive gear. You can see here there's badons, there's blazing staffs, there's siege bows, all sorts. Generally, people are running 7-1 equivalent, or sometimes even 8-1 for the best groups. So quite expensive gear. Now, what a lot of people are doing now, obviously, scouting with an alt character is against the terms of Surface. You may not have one of your own alts on a different account scouting the dungeon. So what most groups are tending to do nowadays is you employ what's called a chest rat. So the chest rat follows the group around, generally, you know, a couple of screens behind, and he will get all of the loot. You'll drop all of the loot on the floor. You won't pick anything up. You'll just kill mobs and move on. and you won't open any chests unless like you happen to AoE them down by accident, because some of the pools end up on chests, and the chest rat will get all of the goodies. In some of this video you might see us looting because our chest rat isn't there yet or whatever, but generally that's the best way to keep safe, because you don't want to get jumped with all this expensive gear. And the chest rat can easily make 2 million plus an hour in all of the goodies that he's going to be picking up. So once you get down to it, what builds do you need for the Keeper dungeon? You'll notice that generally what's happening here is the nature healer is using protection of nature and his heal over times. He runs off in various directions and he's gonna pull as many mobs as he can and try and drag them in a pattern that makes them stack up. If you watch closely, you'll sort of be able to see the routes he takes and where he ends up. And at a certain point during his path, another player wearing druid sandals will activate Frostwalk. And what this does is drastically slow down all the mobs, stop them reaching the guy who's running with them, and it will just hold them all in place. And once they all arrive in that Frostwalk position, the goal then is for the AoE to open up. Now there's a lot of different builds you can use for this. The more AoE the better, but things that are widely desired are Bow of Badon is very nice because it does AoE damage with that scatter shot, explosive, and the electric storm. And the electric storm actually interrupts all mob casting, which means you're not going to be taking hits from all of those abilities as easy. It's really, really nice for just controlling stuff and dealing a ton of damage while not letting them cast their spells. Particularly the druid guys, they do some nasty lightning strikes, they've got slowing attacks, they drop AoEs. The armor pierces from the berserkers can be really annoying as well, so interrupting all that is really good. The build you see me using is a blazing staff. I'm using my normal druid robe, but what I'm also using with the blazing staff, because of its long cooldown, I'm using an assassin hood with meditate, and a pair of leather shoes I'm using refreshing sprint. Both of these abilities lower the cooldowns on my blazing staff, and what they mean is that it comes off of cooldown and it's ready to use in time for the next pack. Because these guys are pulling so fast, you know, you need to be ready for the next one to get those good rates of fame. Siege bows are always very welcome. There's no specific build for them, but they will often run a druid cowl so that the energy on the team can be maintained a little bit easier. I think their cooldown is a little bit shorter. Other weapons that work definitely are longbows are fine. Great Frost and Permafrost Prism work nicely. I see people with spears quite a lot using that Forest of Spears, the one-handed spear lunge, and of course those guys will generally run Mortal Agony, which means that when the mobs go below 50% with that Stalker hood, you apply Mortal Agony and they take a hell of a lot more damage. Anything that does AoE is what you want to bring to those Keeper dungeons. I mean, there's Hellion jackets, Stalker jackets, and Spectre's jackets. A lot of the artifact leather, you know, does nice AoE damage, so that's always a good option. Even carving swords actually tend to be quite popular in fame farms because they can do a massive armor debuff on the entire pack of mobs. The options are endless, but generally it's all about AoE. So anything that's like all single target isn't really that good. Here you can see in the tank slot as well, we are using an incubus mace for that root and snare. So what it means is the mobs will never ever really reach the range DPS unless we mess up the pool. Again, speed is the absolute key. In these dungeon farms, you want to be as quick as possible. You want to be blitzing through and just racking up that fame if you want to hit those good numbers. Because obviously in Albion, fame farming is a little bit, I mean, I don't want to say it's tedious, but it's very repetitive. You know, you do generally end up doing the same dungeons over and over again, or just running hardcore expeditions over and over again, or grinding mobs. I like to do a bit of everything. So every now and then I'll do some dungeon farm. I run a lot of hardcores, and I'll even do some solo farm. And I find that's a good way to stop myself burning out by doing a lot of different types of fame farming. But like I said, the aim is speed, get those big numbers and get your specializations up as quick as possible. And for a long time, you know, it was the worst kept secret in Albion. Everyone was fame farming those Cumbria Morgana dungeons or the Mercia Undead ones and going, oh yeah, these are the best fame in the game. And actually, you know, the Anglia guys were just keeping quiet and doing these crazy AoE pulls in having entire keeper dungeons to themselves. And one of the factors was Anglia dungeons were not getting dove at all. Unlike, you know, Mercia dungeons or circling vultures. If you've ever been there, you know, if you get an hour in the dungeon to yourself, you're having a pretty good time. Whereas, you know, some of the guys in Sun back then were, honestly, they were arranging 14-hour fame farms. I remember my boy Scuzz once when he wanted to level a new character with Halberd, I think it was. And he said, right, guys, I'm going to do 3 days, 14-hour fame farms every day. And he got people to sign up and commit in advance. You know, they pre-selected their composition, their gear. And I don't believe they got one fight in the entire 3 days. So they managed to get a crazy amount of fame. He practically got to 100 spec Halberd in 3 days. And, you know, we really have enjoyed it. And now they've actually added some keeper dungeons over in the other continents, I believe. So they're more readily available. And there is a couple in the Royal Continent as well. Obviously, the Royal Continent, you won't get as much fame because it's got a debuff due to being red or yellow zones as opposed to black zones. But it's still worth doing if you really don't have access to the black zone, or your guys, you know, are wanting to keep it a bit more local and stay safe, because generally you'll find various dungeons tend to be owned by certain guilds, and if you aren't part of that guild or an alliance and you get found out in these places, you generally expect quite a quick response from the locals, if you like. So pick your fame farm spots. Generally, one of the best things to do if you do want a fame farm in the black zone is pick a dungeon like in the opposite of its prime time. So if a dungeon has an NA prime time and it's an NA guild or alliance that generally controls all the territory, then farming it in the EU daytime or EU prime time might be a little bit more less risky than farming it during their prime time when they're likely to be using it. Again, make sure if you can convince someone to be a chest rat for you, pay them well for the job, because obviously they're not getting any fame unless you've agreed to let them keep all the tomes they find. And, you know, if you can get a chest rat, then it is relatively safe as long as you A out and know your escape routes on your mounts. So don't be afraid to bring the big gear. Now, in these dungeons, the various mobs, there's nothing too difficult to worry about mob-wise in here. You've got the Berserkers who do a armor pierce ability. They do a cleave ability that knocks everybody back. And they do a enrage into a spinning ability. Generally, the enrage, they should be dead before they actually finish enraging if you're AoEing properly, so don't worry about that. The axe throwers actually do more damage generally than the Berserkers. They do a nice line mini stun damage ability. I mean, none of these abilities hit too hard if you're in good gear. If you're used to hardcore expeditions where everything one-shots you, these are quite puny by comparison. However, with the size of the pulls that we're doing in these dungeons, you have to be aware that if you take aggro from everything at the same time, it will kill you. The Druids do a lightning strike ability, which has 3 areas that pop up, and then after the indicator expands, lightning comes down, which does moderate damage, and they cast a channeled lightning storm, which then sticks on the ground and moves slowly towards a player. And this slows you and does a little bit of damage, but it zones people out, which is quite annoying. However, there were a couple of changes in recent patches, so this is now an interruptible ability. So something like a Badon will actually stop it, Fire Wave, all sorts of things can interrupt. But again, honestly, if you're doing it right, most of the mobs should be dying before they get off any meaningful abilities. The 2 trash mobs, the wildlings and the knife throwers, they don't have any special abilities at all. And then the only other mobs are the giants and the mushroom throwers. Now, the giants have actually hurt the fame per hour in this dungeon, because the giants recently got a buff where they do a massive AoE stun, they're knocking back more, and they're actually harder to deal with in the initial volley. So they've actually nerfed the fame in this dungeon a little bit. The 650 that Skarnex and his group were getting per hour was pre-patch. Now, obviously, the fame went up 16.5%, which is a big jump, but they have actually said they've been slightly worse off because Giants is a lot slower now. You've also got the mushroom throwers, which now do a fiery aura as well as the energy mushroom, and you've got the bone crusher sharp eyes, who are like the gun turret ones who fire the balls that silence everybody. The balls generally you want to fire away from your squad if you can. You don't want to be pointing them at your team, so if you're the tank, try and keep the sharp eyes away from your team. But honestly, everything should just be melting in the AoE all as one, so there's really not a lot of danger once you know what you're doing. You can watch the video, you can learn the pulls by just studying what happens here, and yeah, the rest is up to you. Just get yourself a good Fame Farm squad together and see what you could do. For pulling some of the harder pulls in this dungeon, I recommend having a Gigantify, using cheap Gigantify potions on your puller, just for certain really hard pulls. The real critical elements are a good puller and someone who knows how to frostwalk, and obviously a healer. But the healer can be the puller. Other than that, just stack up on plenty of AoE DPS and let the fame roll in. So, next up in the series, we'll be checking out some of the other dungeons in the game that you can fame farm, as well as some open world fame farming spots, and looking at solo fame. Now, if you feel you've got a really good group that knows how to fame farm certain dungeons, please feel free to get in touch with me. I'd love to tag along and see how you do it. Maybe make a video on some of the best fame farmers in the game. And likewise, if you're interested in the hardcore expedition fame, where you can in fact make up to 1 million an hour if you're doing the super high level maps. If you want to get into hardcores, learn a little bit more about that, there is a hardcore expedition playlist available on my YouTube with some tutorials, some high level map runs, as well as an introduction video to hardcores if you've never done them before. Anyway, I hope you enjoy this video, guys. Just keep this going in the background and you'll be able to see the rest of the fame farm for sure. Don't forget to like and subscribe the channel and leave a comment below if you've got any thoughts. Anyway, thank you for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.